I stared at my phone screen for what felt like an eternity, my thumb hovering over the payment confirmation button. $350. Not a typo, not a mistake. 350 actual dollars charged to my credit card for food I never ordered at a restaurant I'd never even heard of. All because my mother-in-law decided to play a prank that wasn't funny. My hands were shaking. I could feel my chest tightening, that familiar pressure that comes right before you say something you can't take back. I looked at the notification again. DoorDash order placed at Bella Notte Italian restaurant. Delivery to your address. Estimated arrival 6:47 p.m. It was 6:43 p.m. That was 3 weeks ago. But let me back up, because this didn't just happen out of nowhere. This was the culmination of years of what I thought was harmless family tension, the kind every marriage comes with. I just didn't realize how deep the fault lines had gotten. My wife Sarah and I had bought our house in suburban Columbus about 5 years ago. It was a modest 3-bedroom colonial on a quiet street in the Worthington area. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. We'd saved for 3 years to scrape together the down payment, and closing day felt like winning the lottery. I remember Sarah crying in the driveway, just standing there in the middle of September sunshine, holding the keys like they were made of gold. I'm a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm. Nothing glamorous, but steady work, decent benefits, and I'd worked my way up from crew supervisor over a decade. Sarah works in medical coding from home, which was perfect when we decided to start thinking about kids. We weren't rich by any stretch, but we were comfortable. We had that American dream thing going, the house, the 2 cars, date nights once a month, a vacation planned for next summer. Sarah's mom, Linda, had been a fixture in our lives since we got married. She lived about 15 minutes away in an assisted living community called Sunrise Gardens, though calling it that made it sound fancier than it was. Linda was 68, still sharp as a tack, still driving herself around, still very much capable of making everyone's life interesting, whether they wanted it to be or not. I want to be fair here. Linda wasn't a monster. She was a widow. Sarah's dad had passed 8 years ago. And she sometimes came across as intrusive in the way some older parents do. She'd pop over unannounced with casseroles. She'd rearrange things in our kitchen when she thought we weren't looking. She had opinions about everything. How we were decorating the guest bedroom, whether Sarah should cut her hair shorter, why we weren't attending the church Linda preferred. But the thing about Linda was that she genuinely believed everything she did came from a place of love. And Sarah, bless her heart, usually just let it slide. "That's just Mom," she'd say with that tired laugh that wives get when they're defending family behavior they've grown accustomed to tolerating. Last Christmas, Linda had suggested, not asked, suggested, that we host Thanksgiving the following November. She said Sunrise Gardens was depressing for the holidays, and she wanted to spend it with family. Sarah immediately agreed. I remember feeling a little flutter of anxiety about it, because hosting Thanksgiving is no joke. But Sarah looked so happy that I just smiled and nodded. That was the first warning sign I missed. The second warning came in early February, when Linda started calling Sarah constantly about the menu, not asking what we were planning, telling Sarah what we should make. Turkey, obviously, but also her famous sweet potato casserole with the marshmallows, and the green bean casserole her mother had made, and Sarah's grandmother's cornbread stuffing, and on and on. "Mom, it's still 9 months away," Sarah said during one of these calls, laughing a little nervously. I was in the living room pretending to watch the Cavaliers game, but listening to every word. "Exactly," Linda replied. "We need to plan now, and you'll need to ask Michael if he's willing to do the turkey. Some men get very territorial about the turkey." I wasn't territorial about the turkey. I didn't even particularly want to cook the turkey. But the way Linda said it, like she was bestowing some kind of masculine responsibility on me, made me bristle a little. By April, Linda had somehow convinced Sarah that we should make the Thanksgiving meal a dry run in October, just to practice and make sure everything went smoothly. I pointed out that this was insane, that Thanksgiving literally happens every year and we'd figured it out before. But Sarah got this look on her face, the one where she was caught between defending her mother and admitting I had a point. "Just humor her," Sarah said. "It makes her happy." I let it go. That was the second warning sign I completely ignored. Then came the Friday in late September when Linda called Sarah in a panic. The assisted living community was doing renovations, and apparently Linda's apartment was going to be torn apart for 2 weeks starting in early October. She needed somewhere to stay. "Of course she can stay with us," Sarah said immediately, before even asking me. I was sitting at the kitchen counter with my coffee when Sarah told me. I set my mug down very carefully because I could feel myself about to say something that would start an argument. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice level, "we need to talk about this first." "What's to talk about? She's my mother. She needs help." "I know that, but we're both working from home. She's going to be here all day, every day, for 2 weeks. And it's right before Thanksgiving, when you're going to be stressed about that dinner anyway." Sarah looked at me with those eyes that have always made it impossible for me to stay mad at her. "Please, Michael, she's all alone out there. Dad's been gone for 8 years. She doesn't have anyone else." I wanted to remind Sarah that Linda had a bridge club, a church group, and about 15 cousins scattered around Ohio. But I didn't. I just sighed and said, "Okay, she can stay." That was the third warning sign, and when I think back on it now, I realize that was the moment I should have drawn a line. Not angrily, not in a mean-spirited way, but clearly. I should have said, "I love your mother, but we need to establish some boundaries here, because this is becoming a pattern." But I didn't. I was trying to be the good husband, the supportive son-in-law, the guy who doesn't make a fuss. 2 weeks later, Linda arrived with 3 suitcases and an energy that filled our entire house. The first week was manageable. Linda arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in early October with her 3 suitcases and her opinions about how we should rearrange the guest room to get better light. She cooked dinner that night, a pot roast that filled the house with that heavy, comforting smell. And Sarah looked so happy watching her mother move around our kitchen that I felt like a jerk for having been anxious about it. By the second week, I understood what I'd missed. Linda didn't just stay in the guest room. She colonized our entire house. She reorganized Sarah's spice rack by color instead of alphabetical order. She left Post-it notes on the bathroom mirror about the proper way to fold bath towels. She rearranged the living room furniture while I was at work, and when I moved it back, she looked hurt and said, "I was just trying to help." The thing that really got me was the food situation. Linda had always been a cook. Sarah's dad had apparently been useless in the kitchen, so Linda had taken over completely. And she seemed to believe that our refrigerator was her personal creative outlet. She'd make these elaborate dishes and leave them uncovered on the shelves. She'd complain that my brand of coffee wasn't good enough and buy a different kind without asking. She'd tell me that the way Sarah made pasta sauce was sloppy and show her the correct way, which was apparently her way. I came home one Thursday around 5 p.m. to find Linda standing at the stove with our kitchen window open, despite it being 50 degrees outside, and she'd made some kind of fish dish that smelled like low tide at the harbor. "Linda," I said, keeping my voice level, "we talked about opening the windows when you cook something strong. The smell gets into everything." She turned around with her wooden spoon in her hand, and I swear she looked at me like I'd just insulted her entire family tree. "This is a classic preparation," she said. "If you had a more refined palate—" "My palate is fine. I just don't want the house smelling like a dock for 3 days." Sarah appeared in the doorway, and I could see her physically trying to figure out which side to take. That was when I realized this was going to be a much longer 2 weeks than I'd thought. By day 10, I was sleeping with earplugs because Linda snored, and the guest room was directly across from ours. By day 12, she'd somehow gotten involved in a dispute with our neighbor Derek about whether his tree branches were hanging over our property line. By day 13, I found her in our office looking through old files on the desk, and when I asked what she was doing, she said she was organizing for us. Linda, those are private, I said quietly. Oh, honey, I'm just trying to help. You and Sarah should really have your taxes organized better. I can help you file if you'd like. We have a CPA. Well, he's clearly not very good if your deductions look like this. I didn't respond. I just walked downstairs and sat in the garage for 30 minutes. Sarah found me out there, sitting on the workbench in the dark. Hey, she said softly. I know she's a lot. Sarah, she went through our personal files. I know. I talked to her about it. And she said she was trying to help. I turned to look at my wife, this woman I loved more than anyone in the world, and I felt something crack inside my chest. That's not helping. That's violating our privacy. I know she didn't mean to. That's almost worse. It means she doesn't even realize that there are boundaries. Sarah sat down next to me on the workbench, and we just sat there in silence for a while. Finally, she said, 2 more days. The renovations are done on Sunday. I nodded, but I didn't feel relieved. I felt like I'd just been given a stay of execution, not a reprieve. Sunday came, and I helped Linda load her suitcases into her Buick LeSabre. She hugged me, and I hugged her back, and she said, "Thank you for letting me stay, Michael. You're a good man." Then she drove away, and Sarah and I stood in the driveway and didn't speak for a long time. "That was hard," Sarah finally said. "Yeah. I'm sorry she was so... Linda." I laughed despite myself. "It's not your fault. She's your mom." But here's the thing I didn't say out loud. I'd made a mistake. I should have set boundaries. I should have told Linda on day 3 that no, she couldn't reorganize our kitchen, and no, she couldn't look through our files. I should have been firm and clear, and not worried about hurting her feelings. Instead, I'd been nice. And nice, I was starting to understand, was sometimes just another word for spineless. The weeks between Linda's departure and Thanksgiving were supposed to be peaceful. Sarah started planning the meal in earnest, making lists and checking recipes, and I tried to help where I could. We agreed that Linda would come over the day before Thanksgiving to help with prep work. Not stay overnight, just come for the day. That seemed manageable. October turned into November, and the holidays started creeping into everything. The decorations went up in stores. The radio switched to Christmas music. Sarah started stress baking 3 weeks early, and my anxiety about hosting Linda for an entire holiday dinner started building like pressure behind a dam. Then, on a Tuesday evening in mid-November, Sarah got a call. I was in the living room watching the Cavs game when I heard her voice go up a pitch. "Mom, slow down. I can't understand you." I muted the TV. "Yes, I remember the green bean casserole." "No, I didn't forget." "Mom, it's still 10 days away." "Well, you can bring the ingredients and make it here." "No, we don't need you to come over this week to practice." "Mom." Sarah was standing in the kitchen doorway, and her face had that exhausted expression it got when Linda was being particularly Linda. "Okay, yes, I'll talk to Michael about it." "No, I can't make that decision without him." "I have to go. I love you. I'll call you tomorrow." She hung up and looked at me. "What now?" I asked, and I didn't bother hiding the dread in my voice. "She wants to come over next Sunday to do a practice run of the whole Thanksgiving dinner. She says we need to test everything to make sure it's perfect." "Sarah, no, absolutely not." "Michael, we make Thanksgiving every year. We know how to make Thanksgiving. This is insane." "I know it's a lot, but..." "A lot? It's excessive. It's intrusive. It's Linda deciding that she knows better than us how to run our own house, and frankly, I'm tired of it." Sarah flinched like I'd raised my voice at her, and I immediately felt like garbage because I had raised my voice. Not screaming, but sharp, angry. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to dial it back. I need you to set a boundary here. With your mom. I know you don't like her. That's not fair. I don't dislike your mom. I dislike that she doesn't respect our space. She's trying, Michael. She's lonely. Dad died 8 years ago, and she's trying to stay connected to family. And there it was, the thing I couldn't argue with. Linda was lonely. Linda was a widow. Linda was Sarah's only remaining parent. And no matter how many boundaries I tried to set, I was going to be the asshole who didn't want the old lady to feel loved. Okay, I said finally. 1 practice dinner. That's it. And then we do Thanksgiving the way we want to do it, and Linda respects that. Sarah looked relieved, but also sad, like she knew I'd given in and wasn't happy about it. The practice dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday. I should have known something was wrong when Linda arrived at noon with not just ingredients, but a printed binder. An actual 3-ring binder with tabs and labeled sections. Timeline, one said. Recipes, said another. Backup plans. Mom, what is this? Sarah asked, flipping through it. A system, Linda said proudly, so nothing goes wrong on the actual day. I caught Sarah's eye. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in how to turn a simple meal into a military operation. Linda timed everything. She corrected Sarah's knife technique. She told me I was seasoning the turkey too aggressively. She reorganized the refrigerator 3 times. By the time we sat down to eat at 7 p.m., I was exhausted, and we'd eaten so much while preparing that no one was actually hungry. Linda took a bite of everything, nodded approvingly, and said, "This will be perfect for the real day." "This is the real day," I muttered into my mashed potatoes. Linda didn't hear me. Or she did, and chose not to respond. The week before Thanksgiving, everything seemed normal. Too normal, maybe. Linda called Sarah a couple of times, but the calls were short and pleasant. She didn't mention the dinner much. I started to think maybe she'd actually accepted that we had things under control. I should have known better. On the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I got a text from Sarah while I was at work. Mom says she wants to order some specialty items from a place in Columbus for Thursday. Is that okay? I texted back, as long as she pays for it. There was a pause. Then, she said she'd use her card. Okay, sounds good. I didn't think about it again. I was slammed at work. We had a commercial build that was behind schedule, and I was putting in long hours trying to get us back on track. I left the office around 6 and stopped at the grocery store to grab some things Sarah had texted me about. Fresh rosemary, good butter, the expensive kind of cream that Linda apparently preferred. I got home around 7, and the house smelled like the prep work Sarah had already started. The dining room table was already set with our good china. The guest room had been cleaned and prepared. Everything was ready for tomorrow. I found Sarah in the kitchen, and she looked stressed. "Hey," I said, kissing the top of her head. "How are you holding up?" "Okay, I think. Mom called again. She's coming early tomorrow to help with last-minute stuff." "How early?" "Like 7 a.m.? I groaned. "Sarah, that's—" "I know, but it makes her happy, and it's just one day." Yeah, that's what I kept telling myself. It's just one day. What I didn't know was that one day was going to blow up in my face in a way I never could have anticipated. It started so innocently that I almost missed it. Thursday morning, I was up at 6. I had a shower, made coffee, and was sitting in the living room when Linda arrived at 6:58 a.m., carrying a large insulated bag. Sarah was already up, already dressed, already looking a little frazzled. "Good morning," Linda said, far too cheerfully for that hour. "I brought some specialty items. Let me show you." She opened the bag and pulled out what looked like fancy Italian meats, some kind of imported cheese, and a box of chocolates. "This is so sweet, Linda," Sarah said, genuinely touched. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to. Now, let me get started on the appetizers." And with that, Linda took over. Not in a mean way, in that way where she just sort of assumed command and everyone else fell in line. I stayed out of the kitchen. I'd learned that lesson. I went upstairs and started getting dressed, and when I came back down at 8, I could hear Sarah and Linda having some kind of disagreement about whether the stuffing should include oysters. Absolutely, Linda was saying. That's how my mother made it. But Mom, Michael doesn't like oysters. Oh, he'll eat it if you make it properly. I decided to stay upstairs and get ready for work. I had to go in for a few hours to check on the commercial build, and I was actually grateful for the excuse to escape. When I left at 9 a.m., everything seemed fine. The house smelled amazing. The table was set. Sarah and Linda were working together, and while there was clearly some tension about whose way was the right way, they seemed okay. I kissed Sarah goodbye and told her I'd be back by 3 to help with final prep. Drive safe, she said. And Michael, thank you for being patient with Mom. I didn't know what I was thanking myself for yet, but I would. I was at the job site by 9:30, walking the perimeter of the commercial space with my foreman, Derek, a different Derek than our neighbor, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your DoorDash order has been placed. Estimated delivery, 6:47 p.m. I frowned. I hadn't ordered anything from DoorDash. I opened the notification and clicked through to see the order details. Bella Notte Italian Restaurant. Delivery to my home address. Order total, $347.89. My chest went tight. I called Sarah immediately. Hey babe, she answered. What's up? Did you order food from DoorDash? No, why? I just got a notification that an order for $350 was placed to our house. There was a pause. What? No, I didn't order that. Let me check with Mom. I waited, my heart starting to hammer in my chest. Through the phone, I could hear Sarah asking Linda, and then Linda's voice getting smaller and farther away. Oh, that was me. I ordered some specialty dishes from that new Italian place because I thought it would be nice to have something restaurant quality as a backup in case the turkey. Mom, why did you use Michael's card? Sarah's voice had changed. It had that sharp edge it got when she was upset. I don't have my card with me, and I assumed Michael wouldn't mind. We're family. It's just food for Thanksgiving. I couldn't hear the rest of the conversation because the ringing in my ears had gotten too loud. $350. That wasn't a small amount. That wasn't, oops, let me pay you back. That was the kind of amount that made a difference in our monthly budget. Sarah got back on the phone. Michael, I'm so sorry. She used your card number. Apparently she wrote it down from when you bought something online and had it delivered to her apartment months ago. She said she was just trying to help by having backup food, and she didn't think you'd mind. She didn't think I'd mind her spending $350 without asking? I know it's wrong. I'm making her cancel it. Sarah, she can't cancel it. It's probably already being prepared. It's going to arrive in... I checked the notification again. In about 9 hours. Oh my God, Sarah said, and she sounded like she was on the verge of crying. Michael, I'm so sorry. I'll figure it out. I'll pay you back. That's not the point. I know it's not, but I don't know what to do right now. I can't cancel it, and we can't have a full restaurant order on top of everything else we're making. You're going to have to tell her no. You're going to have to tell your mother that what she did was unacceptable, and she's going to have to deal with the consequences. Michael, come on. She's 68 years old. I don't care why she was trying to do anything. She stole my credit card number and spent $350 without permission. That's not helping. That's not family. That's theft. I could hear Sarah crying now, these little quiet sobs that made me feel like a monster even though I had every right to be furious. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but your mom needs to understand that there are consequences. I hung up after that, and I spent the next 2 hours at the job site unable to focus on anything. Derek kept asking if I was okay, and I kept saying I was fine, but I wasn't fine. I was absolutely not fine. By the time I left work at 1 p.m., I'd worked myself into a state. I wasn't angry anymore. I was past angry. I was in that cold, clear place where I'd made a decision about something, and I just needed to see it through. When I got home, the house smelled like turkey and sage and all the things Thanksgiving should smell like. Sarah was in the kitchen, and her eyes were red and puffy. Linda was nowhere to be seen. "She went home," Sarah said before I could ask. "About an hour ago. She said she didn't feel well." Convenient. "Michael, please don't do this right now." "Do what? Tell the truth?" "Your mother spent $350 of my money without permission, using a credit card number she had no business having. That's not a small thing." "I know." "Do you? Because you seem like you're defending her." "I'm not defending her, but I'm asking you to think about the fact that she's lonely and she's trying, and yes, she made a terrible mistake, but nothing. There is no but. What she did is wrong." I went upstairs and changed out of my work clothes. When I came back down, Sarah was standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the backyard. "The food's going to arrive in a few hours," she said quietly. "What do you want to do about it?" "I don't know yet." "We can't waste it." "Then I guess we'll have to eat $350 worth of Italian food." "That's not fair." "Fair? Your mom isn't being fair. She's being presumptuous and invasive and—" I stopped myself. "You know what? I'm going to go for a walk." "Michael," but I was already gone. I walked the neighborhood for 2 hours, around the tree-lined streets of Worthington, past houses that look like ours, filled with families probably preparing for their own Thanksgiving dinners. I tried to figure out when I'd become a person who could be this angry with his wife. And I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It felt like it had happened in degrees, over months, each small boundary violation adding up until I was at a breaking point. By the time I got home, it was nearly 6, and sure enough, there was a DoorDash delivery driver standing on our porch with 4 large bags of food. I signed for it, didn't even open it to look, and brought it inside. Sarah was setting the table for dinner. She looked at me with those red eyes, and I could see how much she wanted this to be okay, how much she wanted me to just let it go. But I couldn't. "I called your mom," I said quietly. "She needs to come over and pay for this food. Every cent of it. And then we need to have a conversation about what's acceptable and what's not." She said she doesn't have that kind of cash right now. "Then she can write a check." "Michael, she's embarrassed." "Good. She should be embarrassed." What she did was embarrassing. Sarah looked at me with something like fear in her eyes, and that's when I realized how far I'd let this go. I was no longer fighting about the money or even the violation of using my card. I was fighting about control, about drawing a line that should have been drawn months ago, in the guest room, when Linda was reorganizing our kitchen. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. But I also meant something else underneath it. "But this stops now. This ends." And it did. But not in the way I thought it would. Not even close. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold. I woke up at 5 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. Sarah was already awake, staring at the ceiling next to me. And when I turned to look at her, I could see she'd been crying again. "Hey," I whispered. She didn't respond, just closed her eyes tighter. I got up and went downstairs. The Italian food from Linda was still in the refrigerator, untouched in its containers. I'd paid the $350 to prevent the charge from being disputed. Better to handle it ourselves than have some credit card company investigation hanging over us. But I hadn't decided what to do about it yet. The turkey was sitting on the counter, thawed and ready. Everything Sarah and I had planned for months was ready. And it all felt tainted somehow, like Linda's intrusion had poisoned the whole thing. By 8 a.m., Sarah was showered and dressed, moving through the kitchen like a ghost. I made coffee and tried to get her to eat something, but she just shook her head. "Your mom's not coming, right?" I asked. Sarah looked at me with those exhausted eyes. "I told her not to come until 4. I said we needed the morning to prep without her. And? And she said that was fine, but she'd call if she needed anything. I nodded, but I was already thinking about how this conversation needed to go. Linda couldn't keep doing this. She couldn't keep violating our boundaries, and we couldn't keep letting her. The morning passed in tense silence. Sarah and I worked around each other in the kitchen, not arguing, not really talking either. By noon, the turkey was in the oven, the sides were being prepped, the table looked beautiful, and I still hadn't figured out exactly what I was going to say. At 3:45, Linda texted Sarah, "Running a few minutes late. See you soon." At 4:05, she arrived. She was carrying a pie, her famous pecan pie, the one she made every year, and she was smiling like nothing had happened, like she hadn't stolen my credit card number and spent $350 without permission. "Happy Thanksgiving," she called out, coming through the front door without waiting for us to answer it. She'd given us a key, and we'd never asked for it back. Sarah's face went pale. I felt my jaw clench. "Linda," I said, and my voice came out flat. "We need to talk." She turned to me with that smile still plastered on her face. "Oh, Michael, the turkey smells wonderful. I'm so excited." "I'm not going to do this," I said quietly. "I'm not going to pretend everything is fine. You spent $350 of my money without permission. You used a credit card number you had no right to have. And now you're standing in my house like it didn't happen." The smile faded. Linda looked at Sarah, like she expected her daughter to jump in and defend her. Sarah didn't. She just stood there, gripping the edge of the counter. "I was trying to help," Linda said, and her voice had gone small. "I thought you'd appreciate. I don't care what you thought. What you did was wrong, and it needs to stop." "Michael, I can explain." "No, you can't. There's nothing to explain. You violated my privacy and my trust, and frankly, I'm done." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I was just trying to make the day special. By stealing from me? That's not special, Linda. That's theft. That's crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed." Sarah made a small sound, a whimper almost. I looked at her, and she was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to soften. I wanted to say something kind, but I couldn't. Not yet. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, still looking at Linda. "You're going to write me a check for $350 today, before dinner, and then you're going to understand that your relationship with Sarah doesn't give you the right to do whatever you want in our house or with our things." "Michael," Sarah started. "I'm not done," I said, not unkindly. "Linda, I care about you. I do. But you don't respect boundaries. You reorganize our kitchen without asking. You look through our private files. You use my credit card. You show up unannounced. You make plans for our house and our lives without asking us. And I've let it happen because I didn't want to hurt your feelings. But I'm done with that." Linda was shaking now, and I felt a moment of guilt, but I pushed past it. "You can be part of our family," I continued, "but it has to be on terms where you respect us, where you ask before you do things, where you don't treat our home like it's yours." "I never meant," Linda started. "I know you didn't mean anything bad. That's almost worse. It means you genuinely don't understand that what you're doing is wrong." There was a long silence. Sarah was crying harder now, and I could see her struggling with something. "Mom," she said finally, her voice breaking. "He's right." Linda looked at her daughter like she'd been physically struck. "I love you," Sarah continued. "I do. But Michael's right. You need to respect our boundaries. And you need to understand that what you did, using his card, that was really wrong." Linda sank onto the couch, and she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I thought you wanted me to help," she whispered. "I do want your help," Sarah said, sitting down next to her mother. "But not like this. Not when you're taking over and making decisions for us and spending our money. I need you to be my mom, not my manager." And that was it. That was the moment something shifted. Linda didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just sat there and cried. And Sarah held her, and I stood in the kitchen doorway and felt like I'd both won and lost something at the same time. After about 10 minutes, Linda went to her purse. She pulled out her checkbook with shaking hands and wrote a check for $350. She handed it to me without a word. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I thought you wouldn't mind. I thought it would be nice." "I know," I said, and I sat down on the arm of the couch. "But you have to ask. You have to respect that this is our house and our money and our lives. You can't just do things and expect us to be okay with it." "I understand," Linda said. And I think she actually did. The rest of Thanksgiving was quieter than any holiday I'd experienced with Sarah's family. Linda helped with the food, but she asked first. She suggested things, but she didn't insist. She was present, but she was also clearly thinking about what had happened. We ate dinner around 6:30. The turkey was perfect. The sides were all delicious, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could actually enjoy it. After we finished, Linda helped clean up. Sarah and I worked side by side, and there was a new ease between us that hadn't been there in weeks. When Linda was leaving around 9, she hugged me. It was brief and careful, but it was there. "I'm going to try to do better," she said quietly. "I appreciate that," I replied. "And I appreciate you." She nodded, and then she hugged Sarah, and they held each other for a long moment. After she left, Sarah and I sat on the couch in our living room, exhausted and drained and somehow more connected than we'd been in a long time. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saying what needed to be said. I'm sorry it had to come to that. Don't be. It needed to happen." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the house settle around us. "Do you think she'll actually change?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think she understands now. And that's something." Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder, and I put my arm around her. Outside, the November wind was picking up, and the house felt warm and safe in a way it hadn't in a long time. The thing about boundaries is that you have to set them, and then you have to keep setting them, over and over, until people understand that you're serious. Linda still called unannounced sometimes. She still had opinions about how we should do things. But she asked now. She listened when we said no, and she never, ever touched my credit card again. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better. And sometimes, better is all you can hope for.